In this session, we're going to walk through the process to power on the Arista switch and discuss the Arista A-boot. So on my lab switch here, we're going to issue the command show version, and we can see that this switch in the lab is running 4.15.3F and has been up for 42 minutes. All Arista switches come with redundant power supplies and redundant fans. Most models of the Arista switches are orderable as either front to rear airflow or rear to front airflow. To power on the switch, you simply plug in the power cords. Most switch models do not have a power switch. The device will start up immediately. It will take a few minutes for the switch to run through the A-boot process and to load the operating system, which is known as EOS, or Extensible Operating System. Don't be surprised if the fans run fast and loud for a few minutes. In most models, the fan RPMs will slow down once the OS is loaded. After the power on self-test, the switch enters A-boot. A-boot is the bootloader for Arista switches. Besides helping with the process of booting our switch, A-boot can be used for additional configurations such as console settings and can be password protected for those deployments that require an additional level of security. Once A-boot reads the boot config file, it will look for and load the EOS file stored in Flash. We can drop into A-boot by hitting Ctrl-C when prompted while the switch is booting up. Another way to see the boot-config file is to type the bash command while in the CLI. And since this is a switch in a lab, I'm going to use that process where we just simply type bash, and you can see our prompt changes. Now we're at the Arista Networks EOS shell. Now that we're in bash, we can look directly at the boot-config file. If we type cd/mnt/flash and hit enter, in the Flash directory, we can type ls to get a listing of all the files. And here we can see our boot-config file is one of those included. Now we could type cat boot-config or more boot-config to see the contents of the boot config file. So here we'll type cat space boot-config and hit enter. We can see our EOS boot statement is listed here, which tells us which version of EOS found on Flash to boot with. If this file were empty or missing entirely, our switch will not boot into EOS. In other words, it doesn't look for the latest version or most recently copied EOS file. Rather, the switch will simply stay in A-boot until you remediate the problem. See the Arista configuration guide for more details on A-boot and its various configuration options. To return back to the switch's CLI, we simply type exit to get out of the bash shell. And here you can see we're back to our original hostname prompt. We're back in the CLI and we can type things like show version. This completes the section regarding the overview of powering on our Arista switch and Arista A-boot.